Snow fell without mercy, burying rubble and silencing the battlefield except for the rifle. At a single position on the frozen hillside, she lay motionless for hours, her breath merging with the icy fog. The enemy outnumbered them 10-1. Artillery pounded relentlessly, and the defensive line below was crumbling. But each time they surged forward, a single shot cut through the storm. No one saw her move. No one heard her speak. Only the cold truth remained, one position and fire without end. The valley had become a grave of white. 3 days of continuous snowfall transformed the landscape into something unrecognizable. What once were roads now disappeared beneath 2 feet of powder. Trees bent under the weight. Visibility dropped to less than 50 yards in the heaviest squalls. Captain Rachel Brennan stood in the command bunker, staring at the tactical map with growing dread. "They're probing the eastern flank again," Lieutenant Marcus Hayes reported, his voice tight. "Third time in 2 hours." Rachel traced her finger along the red markers. The enemy had them surrounded on 3 sides, supply routes cut off, reinforcements at least 48 hours away. The situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had predicted. "How many did we lose in the last push?" 7 wounded, 2 critical. Marcus paused. "We're down to 63 combat-effective personnel. 63 against an estimated force of 600. The mathematics were brutal. Rachel's eyes kept returning to one feature on the map, Hill 447, a narrow ridge that overlooked the entire valley approach. Whoever controlled that height controlled the battlefield. Right now, it belonged to them barely. "The high point," she said quietly. "If we lose it, we lose everything." Marcus nodded. "I know. But we can't spare bodies to reinforce it. We're stretched too thin already." Through the bunker's observation slit, Rachel could see the hillside in the distance. Snow swirled across its bare slopes. Dark shapes of evergreens dotted the flanks. Somewhere up there, in the killing cold, someone was already positioned. She'd received the report that morning. One sniper, self-deployed to the ridge. No request for orders, no demand for support. Just a brief radio transmission. "Hill 447. I've got it." The voice had been female, calm, almost conversational. Rachel didn't know her name. The chaos of the retreat had scattered personnel records. But whoever she was, she'd recognized what Rachel now understood. That ridge was the linchpin of their entire defense. "Sir, they're forming up again," a radio man called out. "Looks like battalion strength this time." Rachel grabbed her binoculars. Through the snow, she could make out movement, dark figures gathering in the tree line below Hill 447. They were massing for another assault. "Alert all positions. Prepare for." A single crack split the air. Distant, sharp, unmistakable. Through her binoculars, Rachel saw one of the enemy officers collapse. The formation immediately scattered, soldiers diving for cover. Another shot, another body. The enemy advance halted before it even began. Silence returned, broken only by the wind. Marcus stared toward the ridge. "She's still up there." Rachel lowered her binoculars. In this weather, in these conditions, maintaining accuracy at that range required more than skill. It required something bordering on supernatural focus. The radio crackled. A different voice panicked, young. "Command, this is Southwatch. We've got movement on our wire. They're trying to flank around the..." 2 more shots from the ridge. Measured. Precise. "Scratch that," the voice came back. "Threat neutralized." "How is she doing that?" Rachel didn't answer. She was watching the hillside, trying to spot any sign of the shooter's position. Nothing. Just endless white and shadow. "Get me a weather update," she ordered. "And casualty projections if we hold current positions through nightfall." The numbers came back worse than expected. Temperatures dropping to -15. Frostbite risk severe. Ammunition running low across all positions. And the enemy showed no signs of withdrawal. They had time, resources, the luxury of patience. Rachel's forces had none of those things. "Sir," Marcus kept his voice low, "we should consider falling back to the secondary line, consolidate what we have left." "And abandon the ridge? We can't hold it forever. Better to retreat in order than get overrun piecemeal." Rachel knew he was right tactically, but something made her hesitate. That voice on the radio, those impossible shots through the blizzard. "Give it until dawn," she said finally. "If she can hold that ridge through the night, maybe we have a chance." Marcus didn't argue. He'd heard the shots too. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The enemy regrouped in the valleys below, preparing for the next assault. And somewhere on that frozen hillside, a woman they'd never met continued to guard the line that separated survival from annihilation. One position, one rifle. Against an army. Sergeant Emma Carver pressed her eye against the scope. Breath control, heart rate steady. The world reduced to crosshairs and calculations. 800 yards, wind from the northwest at 12 knots, temperature affecting bullet trajectory by roughly 3 inches at this distance. The scope's lens fogging slightly at the edges. She'd wrapped it in cloth torn from her undershirt to minimize condensation. The position she'd chosen wasn't comfortable. Nothing about this was comfortable. She lay prone between 2 large boulders, a natural depression that provided both cover and concealment. Snow had drifted around her, creating an almost perfect blind. From below, she was invisible. From the sides, just another irregularity in the terrain. The approach to this spot had taken her 4 hours yesterday, climbing through waist-deep drifts, hauling her rifle and ammunition, setting up the hide with painstaking care. Worth it. From here, she could see 3 separate valley approaches, the main road now buried under snow, the stream bed that offered concealed movement, and the open meadow that any flanking force would have to cross. Kill zones. All of them. Emma had studied this terrain during training exercises 2 years ago. Back when peace seemed permanent and winter warfare drills felt academic, she'd memorized every elevation change, every natural choke point. That knowledge was saving lives now. Through her scope, she tracked movement in the tree line, enemy scouts, trying to identify weak points in the defensive perimeter. She let them search. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon. One scout separated from the group, moving with purpose toward a rock outcropping. If he reached it, he'd have a perfect view of the southern machine gun position. Can't allow that. Emma waited until he paused. 3 seconds of stillness. Her fingers squeezed the trigger with practiced smoothness. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The scout dropped. She didn't watch him fall. Already shifting aim, tracking the others as they scrambled back to cover. No follow-up shot needed. The message was clear. This ground belongs to me. Her radio crackled softly. Unknown position. This is command. Identify yourself. Emma ignored it. She'd made her intentions clear with that first transmission. Words were wasted breath now. The enemy was regrouping. She could see officers gesturing, pointing toward her general area. They knew roughly where she was. The challenge was doing anything about it. To dig her out, they'd need to climb the ridge. Exposed, uphill, through deep snow, a killing ground if ever there was one. Emma shifted slightly, easing pressure on her left hip. Circulation was critical. She'd learned that the hard way during Arctic qualification. Let your limbs go numb, and when you need to move fast, you can't. Small movements, constant adjustment, never fully still, never obviously active. The wind picked up. Snow swirled across her scope. She blinked it away, refocused. A new formation was assembling below. Larger, more organized. They were going to try again. Emma pulled 3 magazines closer, checked her backup ammunition. She had maybe 60 rounds total. After that, the rifle became deadweight. 60 rounds against hundreds of soldiers. The math didn't favor her, but math had never been the point. Every minute she held this ridge was another minute for the defensive line to strengthen. Every enemy soldier she pinned down here couldn't attack elsewhere. Every assault she disrupted bought time. Time was the currency of survival. Through the scope, she identified the assault leader. A tall figure gesturing with aggressive confidence. Taking his time. Organizing his troops properly. Professional. Dangerous. Emma adjusted for the increased range. 900 yards now, wind shifting. She exhaled slowly. Squeezed. The rifle spoke. The assault leader crumpled. Chaos erupted below. Soldiers scattered. The formation collapsed before it even began advancing. Emma cycled the bolt. Brass ejected into the snow beside her. 1 round expended. 59 remaining. The position held. For now, Emma's journey to this frozen hillside had begun 3 years earlier. Not in combat. In failure. She'd washed out of her first military specialty. Too slow on the obstacle course. Poor marks in tactical planning. Her instructors had been polite but firm. She wasn't command material. The rejection stung. Emma had enlisted with dreams of leadership, of making strategic decisions that saved lives. Instead, she found herself reassigned to sniper training. It's not glamorous, Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Riley had told her on the first day. You'll spend 95% of your time cold, wet, and bored. The other 5%, people will be actively trying to kill you. Still interested? Emma had nodded. What followed was the hardest 6 months of her life. Physical training that pushed her body past every limit. Mental exercises that tested patience and focus to breaking points. Technical instruction on ballistics, meteorology, camouflage theory. And the cold. Always the cold. Riley believed winter was the ultimate crucible. He trained in northern Norway, where temperatures dropped to -40 and staying alive required constant vigilance. The cold doesn't care about your feelings. He'd lecture while they lay in snow pits for hours. It doesn't negotiate. You either master it, or it kills you. Simple. Emma learned to slow her breathing until it became invisible. Learned to lie motionless for 8 hours while frost formed on her gear. Learned to shoot accurately with frozen fingers and fogged optics. She discovered something unexpected. She was good at waiting. While other candidates grew restless, made mistakes, revealed their positions, Emma could simply exist in stillness. Her mind didn't race, didn't panic, just observed and calculated. You've got the right temperament, Riley told her after she'd qualified expert marksman. Most people can't handle the isolation, but you're comfortable in your own head. That's rare. Now, on this ridge, those words felt prophetic. Emma had been separated from her unit during the chaotic retreat, caught behind enemy lines as the front collapsed faster than anyone predicted. She'd spent 2 days working her way back through hostile territory. When she finally reached friendly positions, the tactical situation was obvious. The ridge needed a defender, someone who could hold it alone. She hadn't asked permission, hadn't waited for orders, just gathered her equipment and climbed. The cold here was worse than anything from training. It worked its way through every layer, found every gap in her clothing. Her toes had lost feeling hours ago. Her fingers ached when she gripped the rifle. Didn't matter. Riley's lessons had been clear. Manage what you can control. Ignore what you can't. She controlled her breathing, controlled her trigger squeeze, controlled which targets she engaged and which she let pass. The cold could claim her body, but it wouldn't touch her focus. Movement below. Enemy forces testing a different approach, trying to move up the western slope under cover of the tree line. Emma tracked them patiently, waited until they committed, waited until retreat would be as dangerous as advance. Then fired. The lead soldier fell. The formation froze, caught in the open. Emma fired again. And again. Panic set in. They broke and ran, abandoning their wounded. She let them go. Ammunition was too precious to waste on fleeing targets. The wind howled across the ridge. Snow stung her face. Somewhere far below, men were dying because of her shots. Emma felt nothing. Not pride, not guilt, not satisfaction. Just the cold calculation of trajectory and wind speed. The next target, the next threat. This was what she'd been trained for. This was what she was. A weapon in human form. Pointed at the enemy. Waiting to fire. The enemy commander was no fool. By noon, Major Victor Dalton had identified the problem. One sniper, single position, devastating effect. He stood in his command post, studying reconnaissance photos. The ridge was circled in red. We've lost 18 men trying to advance on the southern approach, his aide reported. Another dozen wounded, all from a single shooter. Dalton examined the terrain. The position was perfect. Elevation advantage, commanding field of fire, natural protection. Dislodging a skilled sniper from such ground would cost blood. Bring up the mortars, he ordered. I want that ridge suppressed. Continuous fire for 20 minutes. The barrage began 10 minutes later. Explosions rippled across the hillside. Snow and rock erupted skyward. The concussions were visible even from the valley floor. When the smoke cleared, Dalton waited for the advance signal. It never came. Instead, one of his forward observers dropped. Clean headshot. She was still alive, still shooting. Dalton's jaw tightened. Smoke. Lay down smoke across the entire approach, then advance under cover. Canisters hissed. Gray fog rolled up the slope. His troops moved quickly, using the concealment to close the distance. Then the shooting started. Not random fire. Precise shots that found targets despite the smoke. She was listening for movement, shooting at sounds. 3 men down. 4. 5. The advance stalled. Pull back, Dalton ordered tersely. Regroup. This was costing him more than he'd anticipated. Every hour pinned down here was an hour not spent exploiting his numerical advantage elsewhere. Sir, we could flank around. Take the ridge from multiple sides simultaneously. Dalton shook his head. Look at the terrain. Any flanking approach is just as exposed. We'd lose platoons trying. Then what do we do? Good question. The sniper had chosen her ground brilliantly. Every approach was a death trap. Direct assault was suicide. Artillery hadn't dislodged her. Smoke hadn't blinded her. We wait, Dalton said finally. She can't stay up there forever. Cold, fatigue, ammunition, something will break her eventually. We maintain pressure. Rotate fresh troops. Keep her engaged. And if she doesn't break? Dalton didn't answer. Because they both knew the truth. As long as she held that ridge, his entire operation was compromised. One woman, one rifle, holding an army at bay. Up on the ridge, Emma cycled another round. The mortars had been close. One explosion less than 10 meters away, showering her position with debris. Her ears rang. Snow had gotten inside her collar, melting against her skin. She ignored it all. They were probing, testing her resolve, looking for weaknesses. Standard tactics. She'd studied this approach in training. When you can't dig out a defender, you try to break them psychologically, make them feel isolated, helpless, convince them that surrender is preferable to death. Emma wasn't surrendering. Through her scope, she watched them regroup, counted approximately 40 soldiers in the immediate area, more behind the tree line, artillery pieces being repositioned. They were settling in for a siege. Fine. She checked her ammunition. 43 rounds left. Not enough for sustained engagement, but sufficient if she chose targets carefully. Priority 1. Officers and radiomen. Disrupt command and control. Priority 2. Heavy weapons crews. Prevent them from getting systems into position. Priority 3. Anyone who looks like they're about to do something effective. The enemy was learning. Movements more cautious now. Better use of cover. Respect for her kill zone. Good. Fear was another weapon. Every soldier who hesitated before advancing was one less threat. Every officer who thought twice before giving orders bought more time. Emma shifted her position slightly. Her left leg had cramped. She worked it carefully, maintaining her sight picture. The snow was getting heavier. Visibility dropping. That would complicate things. Movement to the east. 2 soldiers trying to sneak up the slope during the squall. Emma waited until they were committed. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to retreat quickly. 2 shots. 2 bodies. The message was clear. Weather doesn't protect you here. Her radio crackled. Command trying again. Sniper position. This is Captain Brennan. If you can hear me, we're holding the line. Your position is critical. How long can you maintain? Emma considered responding. Decided against it. Words were commitments. Promises she might not be able to keep. Better to just keep shooting. Let the results speak for themselves. She settled back into her scope, scanned the approaches, cataloged threats, calculated angles. The fire continued, without end. In the bunker below, Rachel listened to the reports with growing amazement. Another assault repelled. She's still up there. Enemy casualties estimated at 25 to 30. They're pulling back artillery, repositioning for different angles. Marcus stood beside her, shaking his head. I don't understand how she's doing it. The cold alone should have incapacitated her by now. Rachel studied the tactical display. Red enemy markers clustered around Hill 447, blue friendly positions holding steady across the southern perimeter. The ridge was anchoring their entire defense. As long as it held, the enemy couldn't exploit their numerical advantage, couldn't mass forces for a decisive push. Every approach funneled through zones she controlled. "We need to know who she is," Rachel said. "Check every roster. Cross-reference anyone with sniper qualification." It took 30 minutes of searching through scattered records before they found her. Sergeant Emma Carver, a clerk reported, 26 years old. Sniper school graduate, class of 2023. No prior combat deployments. Last assigned to 3rd Battalion before the retreat. Rachel examined the service photo. Young face, serious eyes. Nothing remarkable. Yet, up on that frozen ridge, she was performing miracles. Any psychological evaluations? Medical concerns? All standard, actually. The clerk paused. Her instructors noted exceptional patience and cold weather tolerance. One wrote, "Carver possesses unusual capacity for extended isolation and physical discomfort." That explained something, at least. "Try to raise her on radio," Rachel ordered. "I want direct communication." They tried for 10 minutes. No response. Emma was maintaining radio silence. Professional discipline or personal choice, Rachel couldn't tell. Either way, the effect was the same. A ghost defending the high ground. Reports continued trickling in. South Perimeter reports enemy probing stopped. They're diverting forces toward the ridge. Medical says 4 wounded evacuated successfully. Enemy fire minimal. Ammunition consumption down 60% from yesterday. Every metric improved because of that single position. Marcus pulled Rachel aside. "We can't rely on this indefinitely. What happens when she runs out of ammunition? Or succumbs to exposure? Then we reinforce. Send a team up after dark. Through that terrain? In this weather? Half of them won't make it." Rachel knew he was right, but doing nothing felt worse than taking action. Prepare a relief team anyway. 4 volunteers. Best cold weather gear we have. They move at 2,100 hours. And if she refuses relief? Rachel almost smiled. Something tells me she won't. On the ridge, Emma's world had narrowed to essentials. Scope, target, breath, trigger. Everything else was noise. Her body screamed for warmth, for movement, for rest. She ignored it. The mind could override the body. She'd proven that countless times in training. Pain was information. Discomfort was temporary. Only mission failure was permanent. The enemy was changing tactics again. Smaller groups, more dispersed. Trying to present multiple threats simultaneously. Smart. Emma adjusted her engagement pattern. 1 shot per group, just enough to pin them down, force them to take cover, disrupt momentum. Conserving ammunition now. 37 rounds left. Enough. Had to be enough. She caught movement in her peripheral vision. High angle. Someone trying to work around to her flank using the ridgeline itself. Bold. Emma shifted aim. Difficult shot. Uphill angle. Wind gusting unpredictably. She waited for the target to pause. Fired. Miss. The figure dove behind cover. Emma cursed silently. First miss of the day. Fatigue affecting her judgment. She forced herself to breathe deeper. Clear her mind. Reset. The figure popped up briefly, trying to advance during the distraction of her miss. Emma was ready this time. Second shot. Clean hit. The body tumbled down the slope. 35 rounds. The afternoon dragged on. Snow fell heavier. Temperature dropped further. Emma's extremities had moved past pain into dangerous numbness. Frostbite risk, real and immediate. She flexed her fingers inside her gloves, wiggled her toes inside frozen boots, forced blood to circulate. Movement meant exposure, but immobility meant death just as surely as enemy fire. Balance. Everything was balance. Through the storm, she saw them massing again, larger force this time, preparing for a coordinated push before nightfall. Emma counted heads. Estimated 50 soldiers. She had 35 rounds. Mathematics weren't in her favor. But mathematics had never won wars. Will did. She settled the rifle against her shoulder, waited for them to commit. And when they did, she reminded them why this ridge belonged to her. Darkness came early in the mountains. By 1700 hours, twilight had deepened to black. The snow provided some ambient light, reflecting what little illumination existed. Not enough to shoot by. Emma pulled back from her primary position, moved 30 meters north to her prepared fallback hide. Different angle, different field of fire. Always have an alternate. Riley's voice in her head. She settled into the new position. Smaller, tighter, less comfortable but better concealed. The temperature plummeted. Her breath formed clouds even in the darkness. Ice crystals formed on her eyebrows. Emma ate half a protein bar, sipped water from her canteen. The liquid was slushy, nearly frozen. Hydration and calories, necessary evils. She allowed herself 5 minutes of rest, eyes closed, just listening. The wind howled, snow pelted against rock. In the distance, muffled voices as the enemy established their night positions. They wouldn't assault in darkness. Too risky in this terrain. They'd wait for dawn, which meant Emma had roughly 12 hours. 12 hours to survive temperatures that were actively trying to kill her. She'd prepared for this. Extra layers packed into her rucksack, emergency thermal blanket, chemical hand warmers. But using any of it meant compromising her hide, creating bulky silhouettes, blocking her ability to move quickly. Trade-offs. Emma wrapped the thermal blanket around her core, left her arms free, activated one hand warmer, and tucked it inside her gloves, rotating it between hands every few minutes. Survival, not comfort. The night stretched endlessly. Every hour felt like 3. Her body begged for sleep. Hypothermia whispered seductive promises of rest. She fought it with discipline. Set mental timers. Every 15 minutes, movement, flex muscles, verify consciousness. Around 2,300 hours, she heard sounds below. Equipment moving, voices coordinating. Night assault after all. Emma shifted to her primary position. Brought the rifle up. Useless in this darkness, but the threat might deter them. Flares suddenly lit the sky. Brilliant white light cascaded down, revealing the slope in stark detail. There 20 figures advancing uphill. Emma aimed by instinct more than sight. The flare light was harsh, creating deep shadows. She fired. One figure dropped. Fired again. The formation scattered, but they kept coming. Bolder now. Using the terrain. Moving during light, freezing during darkness as flares burned out. Emma engaged methodically. 1 shot per target, choosing carefully. 29 rounds left. 28, 27. They reached a point 200 yards downslope, close enough to throw grenades if they got lucky. Emma shifted tactics. Rapid fire. 3 shots in quick succession. 3 bodies. The assault wavered, broke. They retreated into darkness, leaving their wounded. Emma reloaded her magazine. 21 rounds remaining. The night was far from over. More flares at 0130 hours. Another probe. Emma drove them back. 17 rounds left. At 0400, they tried the eastern approach. She was waiting. 13 rounds. Dawn was still 3 hours away. Emma's consciousness began to fragment. Micro-sleeps, seconds where she wasn't quite present. Dangerous. She pinched her leg hard enough to bruise. Pain bringing clarity. Stay awake. Stay focused. The mission isn't finished. Around 0500, her radio crackled, voice cutting through static. Carver, this is Captain Brennan. Relief team is standing by. Say the word and they're coming up. Emma lifted the radio. Hesitated. Speaking would reveal her position to anyone listening, but the isolation was wearing her down. Negative, she whispered. Position secure. Maintain current deployment. Acknowledged. You're doing incredible work up there, Sergeant. The whole line is holding because of you. Emma didn't respond, dropped the radio back into her pocket. Words meant nothing. Only results mattered. She settled back into her scope, waiting for dawn, waiting for the next attack, waiting to prove she could endure. First light came at 0647 hours. Gray dawn bleeding through storm clouds. Visibility improving gradually. Emma surveyed the battlefield. Bodies dotted the slope, dark shapes half buried in fresh snow. The enemy's failed assaults marked in blood. Movement in the tree line. They were regrouping, preparing for another push. But something had changed. Emma could see it in their formations. The hesitation, the extra spacing, the way officers stayed back from the front. Fear. She'd inflicted enough casualties that simple mathematics no longer justified the cost. Every soldier down there was calculating survival odds, wondering if the next assault would be their last. Morale was a fragile thing. Emma had shattered theirs. Through her scope, she identified the new assault leader, younger than the previous one, less confident in his movements. She let him organize his troops, watched the formation take shape. Then, just as they were about to advance, she fired. The assault leader fell. Chaos rippled through the ranks. Emma didn't press the attack. Just one shot. One message. I see you. I'm still here. Try again if you dare. The formation dissolved. Soldiers retreating without orders. No pursuit this time. They'd learned that lesson. Emma had 11 rounds left. Needed to make each one count. In the command bunker, Rachel watched the enemy markers on her display. They're pulling back from Hill 447, Marcus reported, redeploying forces to the western sector. Rachel leaned closer. Confirm that. They're actually abandoning the ridge approach? Looks like it. Third consecutive failed assault. They're cutting their losses. This was the opportunity they'd been waiting for. Prepare a limited counterattack, Rachel ordered. We're going to reinforce the ridge properly, get artillery support coordinated. If we can establish a stronger position while they're disorganized. The pieces moved quickly. Friendly forces advanced under covering fire. Secured ground that had been contested for days. The enemy, demoralized and scattered, offered only token resistance, all because one woman had refused to yield. Get a team up to that ridge, Rachel said. I want to meet this Sergeant Carver. Emma heard them coming long before they arrived. Boots crunching through snow, heavy breathing, the sounds of soldiers not trained for stealth. Friendly forces. She stayed in position anyway, rifle ready, couldn't be too careful. Carver, Sergeant Emma Carver, a voice called out. Friendly approach, don't shoot. 4 figures emerged from the tree line, moving cautiously, hands visible. Emma lowered her rifle slightly. They reached her position. Young faces staring in amazement at the tiny hide she'd occupied for nearly 24 hours. Jesus, one of them breathed. You've been up here the whole time? Emma nodded. Command wants you down below. Captain wants to debrief you personally. Emma looked back at her position. The scope field, the approaches she'd guarded. The ridge? We're establishing a platoon-strength position. Proper fortifications. You did your part. Time to let others take over. Emma's body agreed enthusiastically. Her mind was less certain, but orders were orders. She gathered her equipment, checked her rifle one last time. 11 rounds remaining. Hadn't needed them after all. As they descended, Emma looked back once. The ridge stood silent against the gray sky. One position. Her position. Now defended by others. She'd held it. That was enough. The descent should have been routine. Emma and her escort moved carefully down the slope, following a relatively safe route marked by the relief team. Then, the mortars started falling. The enemy hadn't retreated. They'd repositioned. Explosions erupted across the hillside. Snow and rock fragments filled the air. The 4-man escort scattered, seeking cover. Emma hit the ground, rolled behind a boulder. Her rifle clutched tight. "Fall back!" someone screamed. "Fall back to the ridge!" But the barrage was between them and safety. Trapped in the open, Emma assessed quickly. The fire was coming from the northwest, probably a battery they'd moved during the night. Smart play. Wait until defenders expose themselves, then strike. Through the smoke and snow, she saw movement. Enemy infantry advancing under the artillery cover, using the chaos to push up the slope. They were trying to take the ridge while it was between defenders. Emma brought her rifle up, started engaging. One of the escort soldiers, a corporal named David Chen, crawled over to her position. "We need to move!" he shouted over the explosions. "Can't. They'll cut us down." "Then what?" Emma pointed to a rocky outcrop 30 meters upslope. "There. Better cover. We hold until the barrage lifts." "That's suicide. Staying here is certain death. Moving gives us a chance." David stared at her, saw something in her eyes that killed further argument. Okay, okay, I'll get the others. They moved during the next lull, sprinting through snow while explosions chased them. One soldier, Emma didn't know his name, took shrapnel in his leg, went down hard. David and another trooper dragged him to the outcrop. Emma covered their movement. Dropped 2 enemy soldiers who got too close. 9 rounds left. They huddled behind the rocks. The wounded soldier, his name tag said Morrison, was bleeding badly. Apply pressure, Emma ordered. Keep him conscious. David worked on Morrison while Emma scanned for targets. The enemy was being more cautious now. Using the terrain. Good fire discipline. Professional assault. How long can we hold? David asked. Emma counted heads below. At least 30 soldiers moving up the slope in coordinated bounds. 9 rounds. Not long enough. She keyed her radio. Command, this is Carver. We are pinned down. Grid reference, she read off the coordinates. Enemy assault in progress on Hill 447. We need support immediately. Rachel's voice came back tense. Acknowledged. Artillery support inbound. 2 minutes. Keep your heads down. 2 minutes. A lifetime in combat. Emma engaged the closest targets, forcing them to take cover. Buying seconds. 8 rounds. 7. The assault was relentless. Grenades started landing near their position. Rock chips and metal fragments filled the air. Morrison screamed as shrapnel hit him again. David returned fire with his rifle. The other 2 soldiers did the same, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Emma stayed calm, picked her targets, made every shot count. 5 rounds. 4. Then she heard it. The whistle of incoming artillery. Down, she screamed. The hillside erupted. Friendly fire. Walking up the slope, catching the enemy assault in devastating curtain of explosions. Bodies flew. The assault staggered, broke. Emma rose immediately, engaging the survivors as they retreated. 3 rounds. Her rifle ran dry just as the last enemy soldier disappeared into the tree line. Silence fell, broken only by Morrison's labored breathing and the distant rumble of artillery. David stared at her. That was necessary. Emma finished. She dropped the empty magazine, didn't bother reloading. No ammunition left anyway. The ridge had been held, but the cost was written in blood on snow. Help arrived 20 minutes later. A full platoon with medics, supplies, and heavy weapons. They secured the ridge properly this time, dug in, established overlapping fields of fire. Professional occupation. Emma watched them work with detached interest. Her part was finished. Medics attended to Morrison. Severe, but survivable injuries. He'd live. Captain Brennan arrived with the second wave of reinforcements. She found Emma sitting on a rock, methodically cleaning her rifle despite having no ammunition. Sergeant Carver. Emma stood, attempted a salute with frozen fingers. Rachel waved it off. Sit down before you fall down. You look like hell. Yes, ma'am. Rachel studied her. 27 hours. That's how long you held this position alone. Do you understand what you accomplished? Emma shrugged. Did what was necessary. You changed the course of this entire engagement. The enemy was planning a major offensive. Your defense disrupted their timeline, gave us breathing room to reinforce. Casualties across our line are half what they would have been. Others held their positions too. Others had support, supplies, relief. You had nothing but your rifle and your will. Emma didn't respond. What was there to say? Rachel crouched down to eye level. I need to know, why didn't you call for relief? We would have sent support. The ridge needed holding. I could hold it, even at the cost of your life? Emma met her gaze steadily. Every soldier makes that calculation, ma'am. I just made mine from a different position. Rachel nodded slowly. The enemy is withdrawing. Full retreat. Intel says they're calling it off. The losses weren't sustainable. Good. Which means you won. This hill. This battle. You won it. Emma looked out across the valley. The snow was still falling. Bodies still dotted the landscape. The wounded still needed evacuation. Nobody wins, she said quietly. Some just lose less than others. Rachel stood. Get yourself checked by medical. Hot food. Warm tent. That's an order. Yes, ma'am. As Rachel walked away, Emma allowed herself one long look at the ridge. her position, her field of fire, her responsibility. Defended. 3 days later, the snow finally stopped. The battlefield transformed into something almost peaceful, white and silent, the violence buried beneath pristine drifts. Emma sat in the medical tent, her frostbitten fingers bandaged. Mild hypothermia, exhaustion, dehydration. Nothing serious. She'd survived. Soldiers kept stopping by, offering thanks, sharing stories of how her defense had saved their positions. Emma accepted their gratitude with quiet nods, didn't know what else to do. She wasn't a hero, just a soldier who'd found the right position at the right time. Marcus came by with her rifle, freshly cleaned, ammunition pouches restocked. "In case you need it again," he said. Emma took it carefully, the familiar weight comforting in her hands. The ridge? Fortified, permanently manned. "We're calling it Carver's Point now." She grimaced. "Don't do that." Already done. The troops decided. Command approved. Emma set the rifle aside, looked out the tent flap toward the distant hillside. Somewhere up there, her hide still existed. Rocks and snow marking where she'd lain for over a day, fighting an army with patience and precision. One position, one soldier, holding the line when it mattered most. The strategic impact was already clear. With Hill 447 secured, the defensive perimeter had stabilized. Supply routes reopened, reinforcements arrived, the entire tactical situation reversed. All because of one sniper who refused to yield. Rachel visited on the 4th day, brought paperwork, commendation, possibly a medal. "Higher command wants to recognize what you did." Emma shook her head. "Just doing my job." Your job was to survive and return to friendly lines. What you did was beyond that. The ridge needed holding, and you held it, against impossible odds. That's the definition of heroism, Sergeant. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, how many did we lose, total? Rachel's expression sobered. 43 killed, 86 wounded, over the entire engagement. And if I hadn't held the ridge, projections say 3 to 4 times that number. Maybe complete encirclement and annihilation. The mathematics were brutal, but honest. Emma's defense had saved hundreds of lives by taking dozens of enemy lives. She wasn't sure how to feel about that. Rachel seemed to understand. You did what soldiers do, made the hard choices, held the line, let others go home to their families. What happens now? We hold. Reinforcements continue arriving. Eventually, we push back. Reclaim lost ground, standard operations. And me? Rest, recovery, then back to your unit. Rachel paused. Unless you want a new assignment, with your performance, you could write your own ticket. Emma considered. Training instructor? Specialized operations? Command track? I'll stay where I am, she decided. My unit needs snipers. I'm a sniper. Rachel smiled. Somehow I knew you'd say that. Weeks later, when the campaign finally ended and soldiers rotated home, the story of Hill 447 spread, not through official channels, through the soldiers who'd been there, who'd watched one position hold against an army, who'd survived because one woman refused to retreat. The legend grew, embellished in some tellings, downplayed in others, but the core remained true. One position, one rifle, against impossible odds. Some called it miraculous. Emma knew better. It was training, discipline, the willingness to endure. Nothing supernatural. Just a soldier doing what soldiers do, finding the high ground, holding it, no matter the cost. Years later, recruits training in winter warfare would visit Hill 447. Instructors would point to the boulder-strewn slope. Describe the engagement. One sniper, they'd say. 27 hours. Changed everything. And young soldiers would look at that frozen ridge with new understanding, wondering if they'd have the strength to do the same, wondering if one position really could hold against an army. The answer was there, written in snow and stone. With the right soldier, with the right will, one position could hold the world. Emma never returned to that ridge. Didn't need to. The memory was burned into her being. Every contour of terrain, every sight picture, every shot, she carried it forward, through subsequent deployments, through years of service. a reminder of what was possible when retreat wasn't an option, when the line had to hold, when one soldier stood between victory and disaster, and held, not with speeches or heroics, just with endless fire. And the refusal to yield,